Hello.
And then he said,
and that's why we don't let Chuck run the show anymore. Hello, everybody, and welcome to.
That's so awesome. We didn't even plan any of that.
There was no planning involved. Is there
It's
ever?
Is there ever? I mean, really, let's be
It was
honest.
pretty good, though. I like that.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Live here on Keystroke Medium. I am Josh Hayes here with Scott Moon, Chuck Manley, the one and only Steve.
Gone.
As soon as I
And y'all are giving me shit.
You know what's hilarious?
He just up and disappears.
Do you know what's hilarious is that is what exactly a repeat of one of the outtakes on the there he is on the video that Kayleen did, where I'm like, and welcome to the show, and then
I just wanted to do the left side of Chuck.
Is that what you're
Oh, you can move around?
That's
All right, that's it.
Man,
I'm moving around.
if you leave the show, you're not coming back. Let's see. Who Trucker Charlie D got the first comment of the day. He gets the Keystroke Medium golf clap of appreciation. It's a golf clap, Scott.
I'm doing the angry clap. I don't know. What to do.
Hello and welcome. Tom is here. Hello, welcome. I saw Patricia and Corey in his house. Let's see. Tom is here as well. Kayleen slides in. True.
Zoom.
What do you mean we're always on time? What is this nonsense? We might miss a couple of months here and there, but
It's like-
usually when we decide to
We
go
arrive exactly when we supposed to.
that's true.
Mhm.
We're like
We're
wizards.
never
Harry.
late.
Was that like the gangster Gandalf?
That was the worst Gandalf.
We
quote
arrive
ever
right when
made.
we used to.
We show up when we
Supposed to.
want to.
Right
West Side. It's the worst gangster impression ever. this
You?
this show
Love
is this show is starting off swimmingly.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about POVs today and making them better. And this is based off a conversation that Steve and I had several months
Hence
ago.
of Vaseline.
Yes.
What?
Rhett's here.
POV.
This apparently you're supposed to be doing something else, says Rhett.
I don't know what he's talking about.
Oh, Steve's in trouble. Steve's in trouble.
Who is Steve?
Oh yeah, Jamie. I meant Jamie. Yeah,
Jamie Steve Castle Bowyer.
whatever
Yeah.
it is over there. Indigo Dragon's here. Welcome.
Jaime.
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 Let's put Rick's here. I had to get a rental car temporarily until I get another rental car.
He's caught in the space-time continuum loop.
That's awesome. What's up, Lou? Good afternoon. Jaime, why don't you talk about your updates first this week?
What a week it has been. So I am, I'm sure this is supposed to be book updates, but I'm going to give you my entire life updates. So
Yeah, Please start at the very beginning.
Do it. And then I was
started
bored.
when I was 0 years old. And 1984, as a matter of fact. Chuck is thinking I graduated high school.
No, I did not. I was a sophomore in '84.
Back
So
when he was
I-
writing his dissertation on stone tablets. Tink, 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 tink.
Oh, and the horse you rode in on, buddy.
I started neck therapy, decompression therapy over the last week, which I've got a herniated disc, so it keeps me from doing a whole lot of things. So that's been going well. But then, like the week of, I had a daddy-daughter dance with my daughter where she required me to hold her for an hour and a half while we danced. And I had cowboy boots on, so I was jumping around. Listen, cowboy boots are acceptable, like formal wear in Texas, just so you know.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Actually,
Not
probably
great for your
required.
back though.
And no, it was bad. And it was like upbeat music. So like I was jumping with her, and like I've been playing some Fortnite with my son. So like I'm not really supposed to play video games because of the action with my neck. And
Terrible patient is what you are.
That's
I am a
right.
television. I also started writing music for the first time in the last decade. I just had this itch to start writing, which means I've been playing guitar since like October. So I have done all the things that I'm not supposed to do during this period of starting this therapy, but it's been great. As much as I've been in pain, it's been really nice to do some of the things that I just wish I could do. And then as far as writing, Rhett C. Bruno and I are writing a lit RPG series right now, which is a tremendous amount of fun. It's actually just a comedy. When it really comes down to it, take the genre, lit RPG, take all that. It's a freaking comedy, and that's where my heart is. I will make jokes all day long. So that's kind of been my writing time. Athon is we sort of, I don't want to say we took a break because that wouldn't be accurate, but like the winter months are a little bit of a break season for us because Trad Pub dumps all their money into marketing, and so we try not to launch anything brand new during the winter time. So there weren't any really big sort of series launches, and so we're kind of gearing back into the full swing of things, which means all my fun time is over. So
Nice.
that's my update.
Rick said he graduated in
Way to end on a
84.
low note.
Chuck, what about you, bud?
Not let's see, I missed last week, so writing has been kind of slow. I've had some stuff going on outside of that's had my full attention, some family stuff, but I have managed to get a few words done on Jack Dark 3, and I've been playing around just when I'm sitting in waiting rooms or whatever. I keep a little notebook, and I've been playing around with some space fantasy ideas, kind of my take on the Star Wars universe sort of thing. But really that's been about it. I've just been doing a lot of stuff with the family and just scribbling my words wherever and wherever I can.
Nice. Scott, what about you, brother?
Not bad. Last month I had excessive amounts of editing and pretty low word counts, but I plugged in, put the time in. This last probably week or so, well, actually all of February, I have been just smashing words at a just grotesque rate. So I'm very happy about that. I'm a little nervous that I'll go back to work tonight and then it'll come to a crashing halt, and then I'll be wailing in desperation and misery because I'm not getting my words, because that's what I do. But yeah, so far writing is going very well. I'm about to finish a book. I'll finish The Last Reaper 13 either tonight or tomorrow morning, and I'm always excited when a book's coming to an end. So it's for a completion, so to speak. So that's good. We're still trying to sell our house. We listed it. We had all of our real estate people are like, you're going to sell it in 2 days. You're going to get 10 listings or 10 showings a day. Well, then we had like the snowpocalypse hit. We haven't had any showings, so I was a little nervous about that. I'm not particularly loving that, but supposedly that's going to change. The market's strong, and we'll be fine with that. Work's work. The family is everybody. See, I've always wanted all my kids to be musicians, like Jamie Castle, and I gave them all lessons in different things or paid for lessons in different things, but I never push them. If they started to really not practice and stuff, I'm like, well, you're done. It's a privilege to do that. Well, my youngest two have suddenly just somehow just come on full steam towards the music, and they play all the time with various instruments that we've drug out. So I'm excited about that, which means I got to start playing again a little bit. So that's about my update, nice, and the sun is shining. The birds are not singing actually, but they would be if they were around. The geese are out there. We could probably make them make some sound.
They're getting shot. Is what
Yeah.
All the birds.
They're about to get run over in my neighborhood.
That snowpocalypse was no joke, man. Like, our listeners in Alaska and like upstate, wherever it is gonna laugh. We had like 8 inches of snow probably.
Yeah.
In a day, and that's a lot for Kansas. And
is that like a man's 8 inches or a woman's 8 inches?
No, I mean it was like kind of in between. It wasn't like 4 and it wasn't like 12. Well,
and in Kansas, you can have like 1 inch, but then you'll have a 9-foot drift across the only street you need to come home because of all the wind and stuff.
We get 1 inch down here and you'd think the world was coming to an end.
Well, it was nuts.
What they do here is when you have bad weather and you haven't had it for a while, it's everybody wakes up early in the morning, let's say about 5:30 or 6. They get in their car and they just put their foot to the accelerator as hard as they can, and they go down K96 until they all collect at about Oliver and K96 in the ditch.
I had so it's interesting because I had a VA appointment that I've put off and put off and put off and put off for like ever since I got out. And it was supposed to be the day that it snowed. And my buddy who works at the VA is driving there, and he sends me a video while he's going down Kellogg, which is the main thoroughfare. And Kellogg's a 6-lane highway. And he's going through the middle of town. and there like is literally 50 cars on the side of the road, just everywhere. I'm like, nah, I guess I don't have to go to the V8 today. I'll just I'll reschedule. But I kind of had a slow week. This last week I had a couple of sub 1,000 days trying to. One of them was trying to rework some stuff on a short story, and then I was out of town the last couple of days up in Claflin working, and for whatever reason that also slows down my word counts a little bit. But I got I'm up about 6,600 words for the last week or so, and I'm still on a streak. I still have not broken my days written streak, so I think I'm at like 38 counting today for the year. Yeah, 38.
That's the way you get it done right there. That's the magic ticket.
And so I spent some time reworking the short story. It was in somebody else's universe, and I'm tweaking it, and I'm gonna put it in my weaponized universe and kind of make it a kind of a side story that maybe I can tie into the trilogy at some point in time. But so I've been working on that today, doing a whole bunch of handwritten notes on that today. Worked out some plot points for my fantasy last week that I think will make some really good progress in the story there. And then I finished reading Rift to bring my total word, and that's by Lisa Richmond. It's not out yet. I got an early copy. But that brings my total books read in 2022 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books already this year. And I'm really excited by that. One of the resolutions I had this year was to read more, and I've got several printed out stories that I'm reading too. So that's about it for me, I think. Filed off serial numbers of valor. What happened there? What happened there? Rhett says we write too much, apparently. Well, we don't know how much you write, Rhett, because you don't want to play in the Keystro Rimo. So whatever, it's fine.
It's okay. We're not angry or bitter.
So
or slightly, jilted. We're not jilted.
We don't care at all. Don't care. So I wanted to talk about POV today, specifically how to improve writing, whatever POV you're writing. This came from a conversation that Steve and I had. I don't know. That's right, Jamie. Damn it. 3 questions. 5, sir. So I think it was a couple of months ago when we first had this conversation, and I've had it with a couple of people since, and then we just talked about it last week again, and it's his take on writing third person, and him and I both have a tendency to write really close in third. The best example that probably everybody would know would be like Game of Thrones. The book series, like that's really tight, really close in third perspective. And Jamie's assertion is that you can write this third person POV almost as if it was first person. And
a free indirect style.
I had a really difficult time like parsing that, like how does that work? Because, you want to do like italicized thoughts or inner monologues or whatever it is. And Jamie's argument is just take all that out and write it as narrative.
Yeah.
So I want to get Jamie's take on that for a little bit and then see where the conversation takes us.
Well, let's start with the blanket, right? All rules are breakable, and it's not even a rule to begin with, right? Like my opinion doesn't matter at the end of the day. There's going to be examples of tremendously high selling books that do exactly what I'm saying that I don't like. And this just comes down to sometimes preference. Other times I would argue that you're doing the book injustice in the way that you're presenting it I believe that we had a conversation recently, and we'll leave names out of things to protect the guilty. Each of us read the same thing, and there were italicized sentences. In other words, the character was thinking a thought, and it was italicized, but they were full sentences. People don't think in full sentences. Most people don't think in full sentences. You don't walk into a room and see somebody there and go, oh my goodness, there's another person in this room with me. I should probably go to the other room. Like that's not a thought that a human being has. And so when you read it in italics as if it's a thought they're having, you go, this sounds childish. It comes off in a childish way oftentimes. My argument would be that you could take almost anything that you write in italics, if you're writing first or third person in a close way, and just put it in the narrative.
Yeah.
Change anything at all. Now, Rick Partlow is here, and I know Rick has given me the argument that he doesn't like to swear in his narrative, so he uses italics as inner thoughts for the character to be able to swear. That's fine. I mean, I'm not going to argue whether or not that's a good idea, a bad idea. For me personally, I know that if I'm writing a book that I know there are going to be swear words, then I've already made a decision that there's swear words in this book anyway, and I don't think the reader cares one way or another if it's in the narrative or in the character's head. Could be totally wrong there, but that's my own personal thought. I'm writing this lit RPG right now where there's a ton of italics. The main character thinks a lot to a screen, and he's not speaking those words out loud. So I finally, after writing 18 books or whatever it is, I've realized that there is one time when I've actually needed italics. So I can't make the argument anymore that I've never needed italics. But that said, that's kind of my foundation for it. I think that close third person is the exact same thing as first person, only you're using the pronoun he or she instead of I.
Yeah, and like I said, I had some issues making sense of that in my mind. And I'm partially on Rick's side here, where I talk about not cursing in the narrative, and sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. If the character is having some kind of like a sardonic thought, or his thought is counterintuitive to what he's saying, or different than what I'm saying, then I'll include that as like an inner thought. But the one like what you mentioned earlier when you said speaking or thinking in complete sentences, it's the something happens outside, like there's a dangerous voice or a dangerous sound, and in italics, oh my gosh, there's something scary outside, I need to run away, and that's in italics, and it slows down the narrative, and changing that to become a narrative sentence instead of a thought sentence doesn't slow it down, the pacing. And I think it actually improves the tension of the scene, because you're not breaking the narrative to hear the thoughts. Scott, Chuck, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Okay. No, go ahead.
Mine's pretty short. Basically, I think part of this is I agree 100% with what Jamie's saying when it's done well and consistently. I've read authors where I was really just lost into the story, right? Where it just kind of sweeps you away. The problem is when people don't use it consistently or not very much. Like if you use that technique the first time, like 7 chapters into your book, it'll be confusing. It can throw people off. But if it's an established writing style throughout the book, I think it works very well.
Yeah, and I think the only other
and my editor, and the other things I do is I will use italics sometimes because editors will push back. Depends on the editor. Every editor is a little bit different, but they will like try to either eliminate it or put it in italics or put it in quotes or turn it into dialogue. I'm like, no, it's just a thought. But if it's written well and the scene is structured, when it's thoughts, regardless of how you portray it. And that's the thing is if people can the clarity is always the most thing. If you are clear and there's no confusion from the reader, then almost anything works.
You
Well,
can take the words "I thought" out almost 100%.
Oh yeah, I almost always take that out. Maybe like I'll probably use it like twice in a book.
yeah,
I often find that the italics in books take the big ones like Game of Thrones out. I really don't know. I don't really care. I read the books. They're fine. They're good books. So I'm not going to comment on those. But like, let's talk about indie writing for a second. I often find that the italics treat the reader like an idiot. Josh, you
like
mentioned
it makes the reader a Mary Sue or something.
Well, no, not necessarily, but like your statement about like there was a scary noise outside, and then the italics were, "Oh my gosh, there's a scary noise." No shit. We just established that there was a scary noise outside.
Right.
Let's just assume that the character's reaction to that scary sound was enough to clarify the situation instead of needing us to explain in thought what
there's another principle there in I think it's Remy and Brown. I think it's a self-editing for fiction writers book, and it talks about one of their biggest precepts is resist the urge to explain. Don't explain stuff.
Yeah.
Don't explain stuff. Just show what's going on and let the reader figure it out. But people always want to clarify, and I have had throughout the 40-some books I've written, every now and then the editors will want me to clarify a little more than I'd like to. But I can also be confusing.
But you also have to keep in mind, sometimes you have to explain if you're doing like world building or something like that. A little explanation is necessary without it becoming an info dump.
Right.
But don't do that in italics, right? Like,
right.
Again, you're talking about the difference between that next paragraph. I'll say this: a lot of times the sentence in italics is used to excuse the writer from having to write the next paragraph.
Yeah.
When you could, I'm not talking about word fluff. I'm talking about let's go deeper into the situation than just a one paragraph italics that doesn't, like Josh says, it actually stops the story.
Right.
It doesn't continue the story. You stop to realize there's a thought going on in the head, and then you're like, okay, now we're back in the story.
Well, in a whole paragraph of internal, usually it's, I can't imagine. I'm trying to think of when I've read something where the character literally thought for a whole paragraph and it wasn't.
Well, and also like look at the what's the word for this? So I'm thinking of it in terms of audiobook presentation, where you have internal dialogue that's italicized that people read and they're like, I know that he's thinking. But in audio format, sometimes you don't get that. Sometimes the narrator doesn't read that correctly, and it just sounds like narrative anyway. And so I don't know that I've listened to a book where I thought that was italicized. But then when you read it and you see the italicized, it like I said before, it kind of slows you down and it repeats the point that you're making, or repeats action, and then you've got to start all over again in the next sentence with the narrative.
So let's touch on a couple questions here that I'm seeing, because this question came up a couple times. Why write in close third person when you could write in first person? The answer is actually yes. In your question, changing points of view. Now, I've written first person. My whole Raptor series is in first person present tense, and there are multiple main characters, and it's very easy to handle that. You just put the dude's name at the top or the chick's name at the top of the chapter.
Well, but it goes deeper than that.
It does go
Every
deeper.
one of those characters has a distinct voice, and that's true for first and third.
Absolutely, 100%. So I've never really seen, Rhett has a series, the Titanborn series, where like he goes back and forth between two first persons, and it never pulls me out of it, because the characters are written with distinct personalities and distinct ways of speaking. And in first person, you could do that. Now, I prefer a book personally when I'm listening. This is just like my listening time, my reading time. I prefer for your narrative to be the character and not a storyteller. Now, in first person, it's always the storyteller. But what I mean by that is like the difference between sort of an omniscient narration style of third person. I want to be in the character's head all the time, because I'm reading about this character. Very plot-driven books, something like Alistair Reynolds or something like that, or some of these more old school sci-fi guys, they're writing, they tell a story and there are characters in the story. I prefer characters. How do I say that?
Experiencing the story.
Experiencing the story maybe is a good way
Right.
of saying it. This is just my personal preference. I mean,
No, and you're absolutely right. And again, I think it comes back to the voice of the character whose eyes you're seeing the story through. In first person, like with Jack Dark, all 3 Jack Dark books are 100% first person from his point of view. I'm locked into Jack's head the entire time.
Yeah.
And he has a distinct way of saying things and reacting to things. Now, if I had jumped over to his best friend Eli, that voice would have changed slightly. That's how you convey that sense of you're just like this little bug in the back of that character's brain, seeing everything through his eyes, because that character is going to interpret everything differently than this other character. And you can do that with third person. You can do it with first person. And I think as far as the italics go, they do have their place. I like to use them, like if a character finds an old journal or something and he reads an entry in it, I'll put that in italics just because that's sort of taking you out of the story. If he thinks, like I just wrote a scene not too long ago where this overweight guy is running across a starship hangar calling a captain's name, and when he gets to the captain, he says, "Hey, aren't you a little young to be a starship captain?" And the guy and I'm writing it in first person, and in italics, I have the guy think, "Aren't you a little heavy to be sprinting across starship hangars?" And then he says, "But I actually said, yeah, I'm a legacy, blah, blah, blah."
Right.
You know, I think you have to use them sparingly, but they definitely have their place.
Rick Partlow wasn't. Rick, you had a cell dropout or something you said in the chat during the point at which I actually credited you for saying there are places for it. At the beginning of this, I made it very clear that I don't think this is a hard, fast rule or anything. Chuck, I would actually argue with you. I could write that exact same scene with 0 italics.
Sure, you could. But I think sometimes it's kind of a shortcut to making something jump out. You know,
right? Again, I mean, we could get lost on this. I prefer first person almost for this very reason, right? Because we know in first person that every single thought. Now, when I see italics in a first person book,
yeah,
I almost immediately quit. I'm like, this is not how you write a first person book. Now, Chuck is talking about a first person book. Maybe that makes sense the way he wrote it. But I'm always in your head in first person. Every single thing you write is a thought of the first person character. So it's hard for me to imagine the need to specify when something is a thought versus every other thought that this.
Well, yeah, but I don't think it's a need. I think it's a stylistic
choice.
Absolutely, just it's a style thing, really.
Well, I think it always comes down to style when you're talking about POV, really, and the narrative. I mean, both of them are the style. Every story could be told in first person or in third person. So when it really comes down to it, is the style in which you want to write.
Right. What you want the finished product to look like.
You know, Kit says a writer in my critique book was writing third person close, drifted into third person omniscient without realizing at first is cleaner. I think both can be super clean and both can be super crappy depending on how well you like. I was not very good at writing first person before I started doing short stories. I don't like writing novels in first person because most of the time when I write a first person, I want to write it the way I think, and that's very it's unreliable. It's kind of
Put that up again. That one from Kit. Let me just say this. This is an indictment on the writer, not the style.
Absolutely.
I don't care what style you're writing in. If you accidentally drift into another narration, that's on you. That's not on the style of the book. You could drift from first person into omniscient narration in the first person. First person's harder because the only information you have is the character's information.
Right.
If he walks into a city that he's never experienced before and he starts telling you about the founder of the city, you effed up. That's wrong.
Well, and I think a lot of people, especially if you haven't really studied the craft, don't realize they're writing omniscient. And then they get a lot of feedback. Well, this character's head jumping and this and that. Well, it's because they're just kind of uncontrolled omniscient POV. But so correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not the expert on Harry Potter and stuff, but that is third person, right?
Yeah.
But it's a very tight third person because you only, as far as I can remember, you only get things from Harry's POV.
No, I think
99% of the time.
So what happens is in that series, she grew as an author. You can see clearly. She starts
Right.
out omniscient. You've got even on the first page.
Yeah, you're right. That makes sense.
Dudley You've got Mr. Dursley, Mrs. Dursley, and then Dudley as a kid, and you're sort of all in their heads. And then
but she holds right, but she holds back so much information that it feels like you only get what Harry knows.
As it goes on, you get that. As she gets that, sort of better as an author.
Right, you're right.
But that, I mean, the point still stands, right? Like you can still do omniscient narration. I think people are so against it. Like you can still do it.
I think it could be really cool done well. I was going to try to start that with the series recently, and I got into it, but I haven't done it for so long. I kind of pulled back to doing what I always do for now. But it could be very interesting.
Well, because like what I put in the description of this video, it's a part of craft that needs to be honed and practiced.
Yeah.
And if you're not good, like I said, I wasn't good at first person when I first started writing it, and
me neither.
Now I'm getting better at it. I actually like doing it because I like doing what Steve's talking about, like not doing the italicized thought, but just running like stream of consciousness almost in the narrative. And I think that's really fun as hell. Like just
that's good
going into it but when I write first person, I do a lot of unreliable, like the short story that I was writing for Jamie Ibsen. It's unreliable, and my problem is I didn't make it clear enough that it was unreliable because I had him do a couple of things and say a couple of things that may or may not have been true, and then so it left the reader thinking, how would he know that? Like but he didn't know anything. He was just lying about whatever it was, and so I've got to do a little bit better job of illustrating the fact that if he's saying something, it could be just a lie, and he's not going to think I'm lying. He's just going to say it.
We run into a few issues sort of in the indie circle that I don't know exist as much in the trad circle. Although I'm sure they do. So don't take that too deeply. Right. But like, first of all, let me say this. Rick has written 50 books. Rick, you've learned how to do things. Rick Partlow, you've learned to do things that not all writers have learned to do. I read a tremendous number of indie books that are submitted to us. And so when I speak on this, I really am speaking as a general, here are the 300 million books that are published to Amazon every single month. We're not talking about the guy who's in the top 10 sci-fi every single day of the year, right? We're talking about sort of all this other stuff where authors are really learning their craft, and there are ways to avoid over-explaining things by dumbing down what you're doing. We run into that, Josh, we run into this issue that you're talking about here, where readers don't understand unreliable narration quite as much in this market, because this market is the indie market is a book a day kind of a market, right? Like we all know that people literally read a book a day. I've got readers who I know read 3 books a day, no joke.
Yeah, that's crazy.
By the end of that, they don't remember what they read in the first book that they read that day, right? Like it's Netflix binge style. So what happens is that they're reading so many books, and so many of them are quote unquote bad books, that when they get to a good book, they don't understand the craft that you've done. They don't understand that the setup in the first 50 pages is for the last 50 pages. And they just assume these first 50 pages are not giving us the information that we need, because they've learned to be spoon-fed everything.
Right.
And again, I want to always be really like careful and not sound like I'm down, like I'm not talking down to any readers or anything. That's just the market we're in.
It's really interesting because neither way is wrong. Like, for example, we were watching Ted Lasso a while back, and then people love Ted Lasso, but everything is resolved in every episode. There's never anything left. But if you watch Yellowstone, nothing is ever resolved ever. And it requires a whole different mindset. So I mean, I can see what you're saying. That people read for a lot of different reasons.
Well, and
at different speeds and stuff.
It's interesting too, because like you mentioned Yellowstone, like I'll watch Yellowstone, and there's a lot of things that happen in Yellowstone that are done through context and through subtext and never actually spoken or talked about or even seen. And you have to do a lot of viewer interpretation to really figure out what happened or
you got to put some work into that.
You got to put two and two together. And there are some people that don't like that. And I'm not one of those people. I love getting things through subtext because that makes me feel like I'm the smartest dude in the room, that I saw that happen and it wasn't spelled out to me. So I that's what I mean. Like sometimes, and especially in this short story, I wrote thinking I was being slick as an author, not including something that needed to be included, thinking like basically giving too much credit to the reader, going, they'll figure this out, where I needed to layer on. And that's not calling the reader stupid. That's just saying I didn't do my job as a writer.
We don't always know the line, and it's different for every reader.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole. I almost had something intelligent to say there for a second, but it slipped out of me. But like I was going to say, if you compare, like if you read Elmore Leonard, if you read his actual books, listen to his audiobooks, his are very lean, and he does a lot of unreliable stuff. But but somehow he gets that information to you through different things where you pretty much always, like, what's the rule? The reader should figure something out in a story, like literally right before you reveal it in the book. Like they're like working up to it, but they should always have the feeling like, oh, I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Because you gave them the right clues. They should never be like, what the fuck happened?
Right.
They should always just barely be able to figure it out before the reveal, because that gives a good reader experience. But if you're just confusing people, then they don't come back.
So then here's the other side of that coin. I agree with you 100%. So this isn't an argument here, but the other side of that coin is that one of the biggest negative review type things that we've seen on Amazon over the past, I don't know, call it 2 years, is people negatively referring to your book as predictable. Now, first of all, not every book has to be a mystery. If it's not a mystery, it's not a mystery, right? Like we're not trying to fool every reader with every single book we write. Sometimes, I mean, listen, you watch let's say James Bond movie, it's always going to be predictable.
You want inevitable but surprising.
But it's
which is harder to do.
One or two little twists that maybe, change everything that you think. But like a friend of mine was reading Cold as Hell. And he's like, I think it's a little bit predictable. I said, cool. You're 66% through. Tell me what you think is going to happen.
Right.
And he told me about 5 or 6 things that he thought was going to happen. I said, okay, you're 30% right. And I'm very happy with you being 30% right, because what that means is that you figured out the things that I kind of wanted you to figure out. And now you're going to be a little bit surprised by some of the things in the ending.
Right.
But like,
I think it's almost impossible to give dedicated genre readers something that isn't just a little bit predictable.
Well,
because they want the same thing over.
Because you have to obey the genre rules.
It's
truly unique.
Well, you mentioned James Bond, and the last James Bond movie was the first James Bond movie where you could not have told me the ending, where I would not have seen it coming.
I agree.
And that's
I
all
definitely didn't see that coming. And that's
right?
50 years of movies right there.
And so you go to a James Bond movie and you know what you're going to get, and you know that he's going to win out at the end and he's going to beat the bad guy. And the only question is how. And then we go and see how cool is he going to do it, not whether or not he's going to survive.
Right.
I saw Spider-Man finally
a
week and a half ago.
Spider-Man 87.
First of all, fantastic movie. Absolutely. Maybe one of the most perfect movies I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it was really good.
But here's the thing. I knew every single thing that was going to happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Did not change. As a matter of fact, the things that I predicted, maybe if you have not watched it, go ahead and mute right now. I'll give you 3 seconds. Mute. 1, 2, 3. Okay. I knew Aunt May was going to die. She had to die.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I knew that Andrew Garfield's character was going to catch MJ, and it was going to be redemption for Gwen Stacy. I knew that in the end, Tom, what is his name?
Holland.
I knew his Spider-Man was not going to restore his relationships. At no point did I go, man, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
But there was nothing wrong with that. It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Unmute.
Well, it's like the difference between Spider-Man and Knives Out. right? Because Knives Out is a movie,
That's
and
great.
you're going in to figure out like what happened.
Right.
For Spider-Man, you're just going for the experience.
Well, yeah, it's Spider-Man. You have expectations, and they better be fulfilled
Yeah.
And that's
because
the
that's
difference
why you're there.
genres.
Do what?
Sorry, Scott, I talked over you.
Oh, no, that was really the end. I just said you have the expectations.
And that's the
People
difference
coming.
between genres, right? Like I get this predictable review on my superhero series, and I'm like, if my superhero series is not predictable to you, then you don't read superhero books.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to trick you here. They're not all evil in the end. I'm not Brandon Sanderson, right? Like,
Right.
giving you what we love as comic books and superheroes.
Yeah, you want heroes.
Well, and I think, we've said it before, that there's no new story under the sun, and everything's
Not
already
really.
been written, and it's very rare that you get kind of an original thing. And I think part of making the story your own is to take it back to POV, is deciding how you're going to present that story, whether you're going to do it through first or you're going to do it through third or second. And please, God, don't do second.
Second's rough.
Please don't do second. The only book that I thought second was ever done well on is it's a Galaxy's Edge book, and I can't
I think
remember.
it's the second book.
Is it the second book?
Yeah,
It's not the
Tom.
second, but it's the third book.
No,
Because the second book's
it's
Galactic
Galaxy's
Outlaws.
Outlaws.
Isn't
Galactic Outlaws.
Is it
But-
Galactic Outlaws?
It's the Tom narrative.
Yeah. And that was really cool because at the end it turned into something that I didn't expect. But
You
I
might be
wouldn't
right, Josh.
I think it's third one.
It
I
might
think
have
it's-
been the third one.
I think it's 3. But that was the only time I've ever read second person. And I didn't really even like it like until the ending. And then I was like,
grew on
okay.
me.
What's
I
so
agree with me.
funny though is that you could read that, and if you know Nick and Jason, you're like, Nick wrote that.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure.
Well, because it wasn't all second person. It was just
Yeah.
parts of it were written.
Nick likes to just screw with people's heads. That's his
Yeah.
whole shtick.
The mad genius thing coming through there.
So I have Cold as Hell here.
Oh, fancy.
Oh, look at you.
This is the ARC copy from Blackstone. Can I read you my dedication? Have you seen my dedication yet?
I don't know if I read it or not. I've read the book. Can't remember the dedication though.
Here we go. For Oliver, who is my son, who has asked about this book every day for the past year. For Juno, whose joy transcends this world. That's my daughter. For Robin, for whom my heart beats. That's my wife. And for Steve Bullier, without whom this book would not exist.
Nice. I like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I had to do it.
That's amazing.
I love that. I'm stealing that when I change it. If I ever use the Chuck Manley name, I'm stealing that. I'm gonna dedicate the first Chuck Manley book to see Stephen Manley.
Yep.
So somebody mentioned earlier doing different kind of voices or character voices in a third person narrative, and we all know in first person you're talking straight through the character, and so it can sound differently. Like if you read the Jack Dark series, it's going to sound like Chuck. If you read Cold as Hell, it's going to sound like James Crowley, and Cold as Hell is really good. Just as a shameless plug for your book, I was not paid for this advertisement. Cold as Hell is a really good book. And to the other reader's point, I saw a lot of things coming in the book, but the ending was different and it was surprising. But it wasn't a whodunit mystery. Like it was just figuring out the different pieces and putting those together at the end. And I thought it was really, they all came together very well. And I thought the very end of the book, the epilogue, was really fantastic. So when it comes out, when does it come out, Steve?
May 24th.
May 24th. I can't wait. I'm going to listen to it on Audible just so I can hear what's his name read the book.
I actually had this. I'm not going to do this. We don't have time. I actually brought this here because I was going to do a reading of it in Roger Clark's voice.
It's a really good narrative or narrator.
Hey, Corey Gillum. No, Dresden Files is never in second.
Oh yeah, I was going to address that. Yeah, it's never
Always first person.
always first.
Very close to Harry's brain, and maybe the best example of first person writing in the history of first person.
Yeah, often different parts of Harry's brain.
So before we
later
get to
books.
the question I just asked, I have a question about Dresden. I've read the first book, and I thought the first book wasn't great.
It
Uh,
kills at book 4.
Yeah,
It-
it
at
picks
book
up in
4.
3, and book 4 is when it really just.
So
Okay.
I'll give you my unsolicited Jim Butcher knowledge. Okay, so Jim was in school, and he was writing in a writing class, and Faith Hunter, that chick, I can't remember what her name is. She wrote the Faith Hunter books, or maybe her name is Faith Hunter. Anyway, I believe she was his teacher, and she was talking against tropes in urban fantasy. And Jim Butcher said, I'm going to do every one of them in book 1. So he wrote Stormfront with the intent to do every single trope you could find in a book in urban fantasy. And they presented it to her, and she went, oh my God, this worked.
Nice.
And so they picked up 3 books. I think it was Rock at the time, picked up 3 books.
Yeah.
And it was one of the very, very, very rare instances where a series went nuts at like book 4. It didn't actually take off selling wise until about the 4th book came out, which I think a lot of people look at that and they go, well, if I do it, my 3 books didn't sell, maybe I'll write a 4th. That's so rare.
But
So,
yeah, that's
like
the thing.
1 and 2 were kind of like their own little encapsulated novels. And like 2, I actually like 2 a lot. It's called Full Moon. It's about Harry versus werewolves. But book 3 is when it sort of kicks off the larger story that arcs all the way into what book 18 or whatever it is we're into now. And so the first 2 you kind of have to get through before the big story starts.
Especially on audio, because James Marsters sounds like he's
outstanding.
Well, yeah, but in books 1 and 2, he sounds like he's eating McDonald's the whole time that he's narrating.
He kind of does. There's a lot of smacking.
Oh God, there's mouth noises.
Yeah.
You could actually hear papers being moved, like he's reading
Yeah.
papers. It's so hard to get through for somebody who I have issues with like mouth noise. If my kids are making mouth noise while I'm eating dinner, I literally have to get up and walk away.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
Flight thing. With my wife, like she's self-conscious of eating around me, and I hate that. I hate it. But like, she'll sit down on the couch to eat, and she's like, "You're gonna want to move now."
And I'm gonna smack the crap out of this Cheeto.
None of that. Her mouth is closed. I hear all the noises, and my brain goes nuts. And that's how that was for me and James Marsters. Then
I'll have to continue it.
And some of that's in audio production because he might have got a bigger budget, a better post-production person clean that stuff up later.
He also just didn't know how to read books yet. He learned, and he's the best narrator alive.
Wow, he's fantastic.
Okay, so what are you guys' thoughts on character voice in third person? Like what are your so somebody you mentioned making different characters sound different in third person or giving
As
them
far as
a
the
different
writing style?
sounding voice. Yeah.
The writing
Yeah, the
style
feel of it.
or the
Because
actual
like
narrator.
so again, going to Game of Thrones because it's the easiest example I can think of. In Tyrion's point of view, you have a very witty, intelligent thought process or narrative, and it's irreverent. But then you go to like what's the little Arya, and Arya's is very young. She doesn't know what she doesn't know, and she may even call things by the wrong name or whatever. What are you guys' thoughts on like the best ways to go about that, especially if you're just learning to try to do something like that?
Well, there's a couple of things, really. I mean, word choice is a big one. You know, you're writing from somebody like Tyrion's perspective. You got to think about, okay, what situation is the character in this scene, and how would they be feeling? Like if they're feeling confident, they're going to use strong, secure language. But if there's someone like you were saying with Arya, or somebody really young, you're going to pick things that are kind of hesitant. You're going to pick things that are like, oh, I don't know, or what should I do, or and it's all going to come down to how the feeling of the character in that moment, and that's how you kind of convey that mindset. It's right. It's word choice, it's pacing. Somebody who's confident is going to be thinking a lot quicker. They're going to be coming up with ideas and reactions a lot quicker. Somebody who's nervous is going to be like, they pause before they respond because they got to really think about what they're going to say, things like that. And I think that's how you kind of evoke character in a third person.
I think the first thing you should do, if especially if you're new, if you're just starting out, or if you just feel like it's a weak spot or whatever, is to just pick one or two main characters you want to sound different, and don't try to do it for everybody in the book, because that'll be a jumble. So pick your most important, and if they're important characters, they should have a strong personality, and it should be fairly easy to make them different, because they'll make different decisions. They'll talk differently, all those things that you said. And I think the variety is important. Like, I like to use lots of, till I had a brain fart, contractions and whatnot. But like, I have artificial intelligence that is a machine. And so the machine doesn't really use contractions very much. And it's easy to tell those two characters apart. And if they're the only people in the scene, you don't even need any dialogue attributions at all, because you can tell who's saying what most of the time.
Right.
Do you put the machine's words in italics?
Just every other one. Sometimes, and I never the letter R.
We don't.
I do. So
I usually alternate it so that if you read the hyphenated or the italicized ones only, it will spell Jamie Castle in every.
That is the Omega code, I believe.
Yeah, you got to really dig for it, but it's there.
Jamie, you were going to say something.
I could speak from the Buried Goddess saga. It's 6 books. It's 1,000,000 words. There's about 15 points of view throughout the whole series. Book 1 starts with just 2 characters back and forth. It's Whitney and Torsten. And Torsten is a very religious paladin type knight. And because of that, with my history as being a pastor, I made Rhett write it. We agreed. I shouldn't say I made Rhett write it, but we agreed that Rhett would
locked him in a room.
Yeah. Rhett's not a believer. He's not a pastor. And I thought that he would do a better job of writing something that wasn't overtly religious. I would have had very hard times with some of the things that he dealt with, because I would go, well, a guy that was super religious wouldn't do that. But 9 out of 10 other people in this world would never even consider that. But because I was so close to it, it was hard for me to do that. And then I wrote Whitney, and he's very irreverent. He jokes a lot. He's me. He's literally just me on paper. And what I thought was fun about it was, well, I shouldn't say it that way. It was actually horrible. But when we first started writing it, Rhett asked me to write a useless, like almost like an essay from Whitney's point of view, just so that I could understand the character before getting really deep into it, because I was having trouble. I'd never written anything nearly that big or that epic, and I was just having trouble. And Rhett's like, just stop what you're doing and write this essay. I don't think he ever read it or anything, but oh my man, it helped me so much.
Oh yeah, that's a great way to do that. Before I wrote Jack Dark, I actually sat down and had Jack tell me about himself. I wrote everything I wrote in his voice, from his, like he was sitting across the table from me.
Yep.
I do that with a lot of times with characters, especially in first person narratives. That's a great, and what's really fun is when you do your villains that way, because I like sit down and I'll have the villain justify to me why they're not a villain.
That helps you actually write the series.
Absolutely.
Now you know why. How many times do we write villains where we go, I don't really know what his motivation is now. We've already established that clearly. And I think that in our fast writing type of world that we live in, people go, well, I can't do that because then I'm taking away from times writing the book. It's going to make your book so much better.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, like doing silly, it's not silly, but doing things like that aren't actively putting words to paper in your book are sometimes some of the greatest learning experiences you can have as a writer. And I've said this for a couple of weeks now. One of my big things is learning to be a better writer this year. And, like you said, you get into this 30-day, 60-day, 90-day cycle or whatever it is, and all you have time for is putting words on paper into your draft to complete your book. But just taking an hour and doing an essay or doing some kind of just character work, like, yeah, it doesn't, like a lot of people put, it is true. And I didn't say it, Rhett said it. Well, Rhett didn't say it. David said it, but still, it's true. But no, I think that
Your audio listeners are going to go, "What the f just happened?"
Oh yeah, so Rhett says I'm the Stephen King of indies, which a fan said that I was the Stephen King of military sci-fi or something like that.
I think we were
Which
all
is
very
true.
drunk during that
And it might have been
conversation.
slightly inebriated.
There was a
Yeah,
lot of whiskey going around in Vegas.
There was a lot of
There's
alcohol in that
a lot
conversation.
a lot of whiskey.
My favorite character. Were you going? Were you talking stuff?
No, yeah, go for it.
My favorite character. One of my favorite characters to write was this. We have a vampire named Kazimir. And he's like hundreds of years old, and so it was third person, but it was close third person, so it was him. So he was just very like poetic and very like he didn't speak in these and thous or anything like that. But when you got to a Kazimir chapter, you knew it was a Kazimir chapter because everything else is written so colloquially and like sort of modern feeling. And then we get to Kazimir, and I had so much fun writing that. And I think that, again, if you learn your characters, you can have a tremendous amount of fun separating the voices that are your characters. And it doesn't even have to be point of view chapters to do that. Even when the character is speaking in dialogue, know how they would speak.
Right.
Know the words that they would say. And here's another one. If your other characters use a certain word that's a little more like a specific kind of a word, you know the type of words I'm talking about, don't let your other characters use it.
Right.
That's a good point, because it'll seep into other dialogue because it feels so good when you get something that really works, but you got to save it for the
I think
one character.
doing little tweaks like that is some of the funnest things you could do, whether you're doing POV writing or not. Like I've got a character in Weaponized that he says "my guy," like that's how he talks. He's like "my guy," and he's not Italian. That's what he says. And it's really fun to write his character and then figuring out where the coolest place is to put that little, it's like a character tick. And having, I mean, it's not necessary to have all your characters have ticks, but every single one of us has things that we do repeatedly all the time and we don't even know. And so it's not out of character for every character to have one, but it's also not necessary either.
My 16-year-old main character in Raptors says the word "actually" all the time. Right? And because of that, none of the other characters do.
Yeah.
Because that's Sawyer. He's 16 and that's just his word. And so at one point somebody said, you say "actually" a lot. So I did go back through and I reduced the number of "actuallys" because I guess Chris and I were both doing it and we didn't realize just how many times we'd said it. But that was a purposeful sort of a tick. And they're fun. They're fun to play with.
One of the words I used in the short story that I'm writing is "definitely," and word hates "definitely." It wants to take "definitely" out every time I write it because it's a what is it? Is it an adjective? I don't know. I'm not an English major. It's an adjective that word doesn't, an adverb that word doesn't like. And so you could be more concise than that. I'm like, I'm not trying to be concise.
Qualifying adverb.
Yeah, qualifier. Adverb. Yeah.
I used "muchly" in the Dark Landings because he was an alien, and so he had some language quirks, but he used "muchly," and it became my favorite word to say, basically in all contexts, in or out of the story, for about a year. and people that read the book would use it to me all the time. They would speak to me with that word because they liked it.
Andy Weir has one in Project Hail Mary, which, by the way, best book of the year last year, without a doubt. It was so good.
Really?
Oh God, so good. Especially if you listen to Ray Porter's narration of it, it's phenomenal. And he's got this alien creature in there that uses the word "amaze." Like instead of saying it's amazing, it's amaze. And by the end of the book, I mean, like if you go look at the reviews for that book, probably 9 out of 10 of those, the subject matter is amaze. And that's just an example of how well sort of those kinds of ticks can work properly.
When they work, they really work.
95,632 ratings on Audible with a 4.9 average.
You haven't listened to the book?
No.
You're missing out on
what's it called again?
Project Hail Mary.
Well, I just got it with a credit.
This was how many hours was that?
Hold on. I'm at the buy now screen. I have to back up.
I feel like it was like 20 hours.
16 hours.
Dude, I listened
16
to it in
hours,
2
10
days. I could
Really?
not stop listening to that book.
Wow. I'll have to
Wow.
check that out.
I'll put it on my list.
So I'll do it. Talk about it next show or a show.
I'd be cool with that. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for coming and hanging out with us this week on live. I think next week when we're going to have, I think next week is when we're going to have Casey Zell, or maybe that's the next. Huh? What?
R-O-Fessional.
Yes.
R-O-Fessional.
I'm not. It's not next week. I think it's the week after. We're gonna have Casey Zell on.
I feel like about half of what you said should have been in italics.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
There you go. Somebody else talk while I use my computer.
I have absolutely no idea. I don't know what's coming on next week. We'll have to figure that out.
Is Casey back in the States?
No, I
Is
don't
she
think
still in
she's.
Japan.
I don't think she's back till this summer. Yes.
Whoa.
That's the way. That should be our call.
Thanks everybody for coming and hanging out with us today. Kit, Tom, Patricia, Walt. I saw Walt sneaking in there. William Tyler Davis
Like
was
a
here.
ninja.
Rhett Bruno made an appearance, a very rare appearance today, but he was in.
Gave
rare
good
form
advice,
and
too.
Great advice. Great advice. You can't get any better. Everybody else that was in the live chat, thank you guys for hanging out with us today. If you're listening on the audio feed and you didn't know, we're live on YouTube-ish every Monday at 2 p.m. I think Walt is doing Coffee and Concepts tomorrow, and then I think the Writer's Journey kicks off in March.
Iron back up in March.
March. Okay. That was February, but now it's March. I read
Has
that.
Dean Floyd started?
Dean Floyd has started his first. Well, he did.
He's done 2 episodes.
He's done 2.
Yeah.
And
under the iceberg.
and James A. Aaron is co-hosting with him ish. And then the marathon author should be this week too.
James S. Aaron?
Is it James
It
S.
is.
Aaron?
It is.
Hmm.
It's James S. A. Ron.
Maybe I was thinking James S.A. Corey and then
Yes.
just said A. Yeah.
I do that all the time.
A lot of A's. Just throw an A in there. It's never wrong.
Just,
Yeah, it's never wrong. Thank you guys. Thanks everybody for listening. If you need some coffee, we've got coffee on the website, keystroke.medium.com/coffee. Go and pick you up a bag. They're fantastic. And I drink way too much of it every day. Come back next week. We're going to talk about some reading. We're going to talk about some writing and, of course, everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. See ya.
Says in
Later,
italics.
guys.